We'd save a lot of money moving to cloud.
We still need our legacy systems.
How do we move to the cloud and keep our business running?
Where do we even start?
Finding the right partners, managing the whole ecosystem.
We really need market innovation if we want to grow.
I think we're stuck in our process. It's always plan, build, run.
How can we move faster?
We need to put the customer at the center of everything.
We're so siloed, we can't scale anything across the enterprise.
How do we get employees to embrace change?
Digital will improve our collaboration and speed.
We have no idea what return we'll get on our investments.
How do I know how much to invest and where to focus?
It would be great if we could actually measure digital ROI.
Our competitors are all going digital.
How do we use digital to increase revenue and streamline operations?
Imagine if we could be the disruptor,
Instead of trying to catch up to everyone else.
Unleash the power of digital with ISG. We can help you transform your business with the right partners and processes and technologies that adapt quickly to changing customer demands and market forces, creating new ways of working and connecting that reduces costs and allows you to invest in the future. With research, tools, and support that show you where and how fast your digital investments create value, you have questions. ISG has the answers. From your systems, your operations, your sourcing, your mindset. It's time to leave legacy behind and move into a new world of possibility. Partner with ISG and unleash your digital potential.
Good morning. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining the first virtual Future Workplace Summit from ISG. We know that most of you are dialing from home, you've been impacted by current events, then you're dealing with your new normal, you might be caring after a sick loved one, you might be trying to juggle homeschooling, or you're set up at the end of the dining room table. Whatever your circumstances are, we really appreciate you investing your time and attention in this event today. For those of you that don't know ISG, we're a leading technology research and advisory firm. We focus on digital transformation services, research, subject matter expertise, advisory, market data, and commercial frameworks. And we run something like 20 events through the year. But as you can see from the slide here, we're evaluating each one and flipping them to the virtual format as circumstances dictate. But we're excited about how that'll work today. And there's a range of tools that you've got that I'll go through later to participate in the agenda. So thanks, as always, to our sponsors. So we've Blue Jeans, DXC Technology, Infosys and Unisys, and our media partner, HR Tech Outlook. And thanks also to our brave startups who are going to be in the Startup Challenge later on. Now, this is a favourite part of the event for many people, and you'll get the chance to do a live poll after you've heard the pitches from our startups. So we're really looking forward to that later in the agenda. In terms of getting the most out of today, all of the sessions today can be accessed through the agenda. You can mark sessions as favourites, so you'll get notifications when they're due to go up. And then if there is anything you've missed, once the session's taken place, it'll go into the event library so you can stream it on demand later if there's anything you didn't get a chance to see first time round. We're using a platform called Meeting Play for the event today. It's got a range of features which we'd encourage you to try. So we've got virtual booths where you can interact with our sponsors, as well as get hold of resources, videos, white papers, etc. So there's a sponsor link on the left, which you can use to see the virtual booth times. There's also a social feed function, so you can connect with other attendees. We'd also encourage you to participate in polls through the day, particularly the Startup Challenge later on. And then please ask our experts questions through the Q&A function that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll try and do as much as we can online in terms of addressing those, but we'll mop up after the event if we don't get a chance to do them all. Then after the conference, you'll be receiving a link to the feedback survey. So it would be appreciated if you could fill that in. It really does help us understand what you enjoyed, but also where we've got an opportunity to improve things. There's the hashtag that you'll know and love. So that's ISG Future Workplace. Please include that on any social media posts through the day. So, whether there's a favorite quote or a session that you liked, or send us a picture of your working location, We'll put in a prize for the most outlandish location that you can send us a photo of. Whatever it is, just be creative and let us know if you're enjoying the summit, and we'll look forward to seeing those posts as they come in on the social feed. So before we jump into the first session, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the agenda today and put it into context, particularly in terms of current events. So those of you who've been to the Future Workplace before, you know it's a great opportunity for practitioners to network, look at industry data, trends, a range of speakers, the innovation labs, the startup challenge. It's all focused on digital transformation in the workplace. But something a lot of you were telling us was, you get the value of these technologies and new practices. The biggest challenge that you had was taking them from pilot and then engaging the organization to roll them out at scale to capture the true value. Right, fast forward to 2020, March and April. A really serious global event, and it's something that's impacted everybody dialing in today. But from a workplace perspective and a digital transformation perspective, we're in the middle of an event that's compressed what could have taken years into a matter of weeks in terms of transforming the workplace. And if you're dialed into this, the chances are you're in a role where your organization's looking at you saying, well, what next? What do we do going forwards? So as you might expect, ISG's got a range of resources to help with this. And I wanted to briefly flag this up so you can have a look later on. But we've got a resource center, and it's focused on things like whether it's cost takeout or managing risk in your provider ecosystem. We've got a whole range of resources to advise you, and it's worth taking a look through there. Something in particular that we ran last week, though, is relevant to today. It was a webinar called The Road to Recovery. And it spelled out three main horizons. So we had the immediate one, recover and resolve. So as the dust settles from the easing of the lockdown over the next few months, getting people back into work and getting them operational again. It's the next two horizons that today will be focusing on. So there's the intermediate horizon, number 2, where we're looking at operational resilience. And that's a term that's going to come up through today in terms of looking at processes and practices through the new lens of risk management and thinking about future events like this that might happen. And also getting competitive again, starting to understand customer behaviors and the changes and the impact on the competitive landscape. And then the third horizon we're calling the new future. And that's around, answering the question, what do firms need to do to survive in the medium to long term? What are the capabilities that they need to build to respond to a new competitive landscape? Understand the strategic changes in consumer behavior and really think about the way they're going to work to capture the value and address those challenges. And that's really what we'll be talking about today. So as we go through the agenda, we've got managing and measuring the employee experience. So we'll be looking at culture in the workplace and the employee experience, but also the role that data has to play in that. We'll then flip over and Will be talking about supporting a digital culture through technology. So what are the emerging technologies that are going to come to the fore, and what does it mean when we integrate them with our working practices? And then finally, we'll be looking at the impact of digital change on the workforce. And what are the new skills and competencies that we need to build? What are the new operating models that we need to put into place? So many of you will know ISG, we're a global technology research and advisory firm. So each year we provide research on the future workplace. And as part of that, we look at the trends that are coming through. And the last one that was performed by ISG was in the fourth quarter of last year. So what I wanted to do in this section, we've been talking about the impact of the lockdown and COVID, is revisit those trends like we do every year, and then take a look to see if they still make sense under the new world. Well, clearly the first one does. So connectivity and collaboration. What we were already tracking was the device agnostic access to the workplace, people collaborating across remote locations, and that was something that we absolutely saw was on the rise. Clearly, current events have absolutely driven that through pretty much every workplace. But is it just around video collaboration? So in a previous role, I ran a global PMO, so we had to work and collaborate across time zones, across geographies, And what that led to was a set of practices around choosing the right tool for the job. So look, FaceTime or something like it is great for a one-to-one where you need to see the visual cues of people, and sometimes getting together on a team is good as well. But what we really found, and this is a term that you'll see coming up, is once you get past the wave of collaboration tools focused on people and video, the real game in town is asynchronous collaboration. So what I mean by that is a set of tools and practices that let a whole range of teams across different locations and time zones work on files, orchestrate work together. And that's not just program management tools, it's BAU task management as well. Get live reporting of transparent data and dashboards that any executive can access rather than having a curated PowerPoint created for them. And that's certainly something that we've seen on the rise and we'll be talking about a lot today as we go through the agenda. Another piece that we'll be revisiting later is something that we were already tracking, but I think is going to become really important now. So when we talk about design thinking, there's a whole range of firms, will invest heavily in understanding customer needs from an external perspective. They'll do focus groups, they'll use data, they'll undertake design thinking to put the customer at the heart of their delivery lifecycle. Now, we were already tracking some leading organizations taking those practices and putting design thinking, so thinking about problem statements from a user perspective and putting them at the heart of the delivery lifecycle and turning that internal to the workplace. I think the days of just leaving employees to battle with old green screens or terrible systems that look like the side of a battleship are going to be long gone now. And there's going to be a real focus on the tools that we use to be productive. And then underneath that, the data that we use to make sure that people are working effectively. And when we talk about data, that naturally brings us to the intelligent workplace. Now, previous attendees of the Future Workplace Summit will know that we've talked about this on a few occasions from the physical design perspective. In terms of the research that we're starting to see come through, in terms of the impact of the return to work after the lockdown, we strongly suspect that the trend will be to have potentially fewer people in a single workplace, but have that a lot more intelligent. And beyond things like IoT sensors for climate control and that side of things, we're seeing the trend for design being focused on where people are, logistics, capacity planning, how are people working together, and importantly, how is the workplace integrated with remote communication technologies? I think gone are the days when people would stride into an office full of 100 or more other colleagues, sit down, put their headset in and ignore everybody. I think if you're going into the physical workplace, there needs to be a reason for that, and you need access to the right people and tools, and you need ready access to the colleagues that might be working elsewhere. So we see that this new set of design principles about the workplace will be underpinned by data, and that's going to be sensory data as well as logistics and workflow through the tools that people use. Now that naturally brings us to something we're calling the intelligent enterprise. And again, that's been a theme that's been at Future Workplace Summits for a while. This becomes increasingly important as we look at the new future as people return to work. There are various clients who are telling us that they're viewing their legacy processes through a new lens. If they're overly manual, if they take a lot of paper, if they require people to be face-to-face a lot, then they'll be looking at re-engineering that with automation and ideally a level of autonomous resolution in mind. So for some time, we've been tracking the trend of a whole range of providers putting in place a set of really interesting capabilities that are driven at trying to go for prescriptive analytics. So not just what do I think is about to happen, but how do I solve it? How do I get ahead of the problem? And the whole aim there is to shift left. So that means, tackling problems before they even arise. But if somebody has got a service request, trying to handle that through chatbots or intelligent agents or discrete tools that will be working with the end user before they have to go and tackle a human being. So, we're seeing that come up. I think now, in terms of investments in those technologies, we'll be seeing a whole range of enterprises looking at how they can support the user needs of a whole set of disparate locations. So things like equipment provisioning, desktop services, and technical help, that becomes very different if you're looking at a whole broad spectrum of usage environments, including a large amount of your employees working from home. So that's where the ability to get this level of automation really makes a difference. So when we're talking about working remotely, AR and VR don't necessarily automatically spring to mind. And I think I can say, as a user of VR myself, in the past few years, that's been seen as a bit of a kooky niche use case. We're now seeing that these technologies are getting prime time. I was looking at research a couple of weeks ago that said, due to current events, there's enormous interest in investing in AR and VR, but they were actually on the rise anyway, due to their potential in things like remote specialist help, e-learning remotely, and that side of things. We absolutely see that these technologies will be on the rise. When it comes to things like field support and training, we've seen partners who are specializing in enterprise data visualization, and in some cases merging the physical and virtual environments to create a really realistic set of training modules. There are now startups and providers delivering VR presentation technology that bring concepts to life in a way that a simple WebEx can't do. So we absolutely see that trend coming through, and it is on the rise and getting serious investment dollars now. And I think if you're looking at a future where you really have to choose under what circumstances you're dealing with people face to face, then executives would naturally look at these sorts of technologies. Now, when it comes to analytics in the workplace, we do see that, again, if we're thinking about the external customer experience, there's quite a lot of great practice out there in terms of using data to bring personas and user needs to life. And incidentally, the picture that you see there, it's not a real person. It's from one of my favorite sites, thispersondoesnotexist.com. It's really worth trying if you haven't done it before. It's using a GAN, so that's a generative adversarial network, to create, based on machine learning from millions of photographs, an artificial person. The reason I've put it in here is that's really the sort of idea that we're looking at for fleshing out personas when we're thinking about the workplace. So, where we've modeled external customer segments and personas, that's great. Internally, there's a whole wealth of data that gets generated around how employees, use tools and work together. And as we see mass remote working take place, a lot of the big tech giants, they've sent hundreds of thousands of people home. That gives us a chance to develop one of the biggest experiments in analytics in the workplace for years. So we really get to answer not only what does productivity look like from a remote location, but also how do people use their equipment? How do they use the software and tools that are given to them? And we see this really continuing as a trend and becoming a heavy area of investment as people seek to understand real underlying user behavior and model the services that they're creating around that. So that naturally leads us in general to that overall theme of user experience in the workplace. It's not just about data, it's about sitting down with your users, co-creating with them, involving them in the process to really understand what they need, rather than going off and doing it in the garden shed and then marching out triumphantly with it. And that's really important. Later on in the day, we'll be talking about culture in the workplace. And we know it's great practice to sit down with customers and get iterations and feedback from them as you're delivering new products and services. Including your employees and colleagues in that process sends a really important message that their experience at work is very important, and their say in how they're going to use those tools and the direction that they're going in is equally important. So those are some of the trends that through ISG research, we were already picking up through our partners and client feedback and delivery ecosystems. And I think in summary there, we can see that those trends become even more important as we think about current events, the return from the lockdown, and the new future. Now, those of you who've been to an ISG Future Workplace event before know that we like to do ISG Predicts. So I've taken that and thought about, over the next 6, 12, 18 months, what do we think that's really going to look like? So you could call this the post-lockdown special. So first of all, and this is a term that we're already hearing, operational resilience is going to be a lens through which we're looking at potential investments. And this is going to be a big deal. We'll talk about this later today. But in the past, if you work in digital transformation, you know that you've got to create the business case and engage senior decision makers and stakeholders on whether they're going to invest in it. And they might be risk averse. They're sitting back thinking about how that's going to impact the current state. When we talk about operational resilience, that's a recognition that that legacy current state wasn't a safe place to be. So now, when we're looking at transformation, it's not just ROI in terms of revenue, it's not just around cost efficiency, it's thinking, if another event like this happens, are we able to respond? The reality is, I think everybody kind of got a free hit at current events because nobody really expected the scale of impact that it would have on the workplace. But if something similar happens next year and executives weren't putting in place investments to prepare, that's a very different conversation. So we absolutely see that operational resilience will be on the agenda. Likewise, we've talked about the physical workplace. That will be something that comes up. We're already seeing clients talk about questioning their property strategy. And that doesn't mean they're going to do away with having these locations, but it means thinking again about what they're for. Because potentially now we're seeing, physical proximity as a driver of risk for people. So I've seen some research that says, the office of the future will actually look a bit more like offices used to in terms of cramming in people less, having more space for people to pass by each other, perhaps moving away slightly from some of the open desk formations that we've seen to something a bit more discreet. So that's going to require a real understanding of the needs of the workplace, and that's where we get to things like design thinking. So we do see that intelligent automation and advanced analytics are going to be part of whole new delivery ecosystems. So it's easy to say, and I think it's true, current events, and we'll be talking about this later, current events mean that you can really take a look at, things like robotic process automation, but also cognitive technologies through a new lens. And it's absolutely, around this operational resilience piece, but it's also at that core risk. If you have a paper-driven process, you're going to have a bad time. And people are recognizing the ability to digitize incoming paper as a core foundational capability rather than a novelty. We also see that use of data, and that means external data sources, is going to drive innovation in the workplace. And so people will be looking external to see what niche data provision they could take advantage of. How does that help them understand their customers and their internal processes better? How can they reinvent processes rather than solely automate them? So that's absolutely something that we see on a whole range of agendas for businesses going forward. Now, we'll be talking about Agile today, and Ian's got a session on Agile and digital culture. When we talk about business agility, that's really at more of a macro level. So we strongly see that customer behaviours are likely to change as the year progresses and into next year, as we see travel patterns, retail patterns, their desire to go out, different patterns of socializing. These are difficult to predict. And also in terms of the impact on the marketplace and competitive landscape, that's tough to predict as well. So if you're sitting there thinking, what sort of a business do I want to become? The safest answer is one that can respond to change in those customer behaviors, in the competitive landscape, in the regulatory regime, and responding to change in the risk profile that you're seeing as an organization. That means the ability to deliver at speed. And anecdotally, a range of clients have been talking to us about some of the amazing work that's been done to get people working remotely through this lockdown period. And executives are starting to look at the amount that's been achieved through that time and looking at the program, saying, well, if you'd estimated this, you would have told me this was months, but you got it done in a few weeks. Let's have a look at the behaviours that enabled that and how we can get a bit more of that in your delivery life cycle. So we've talked a bit around the ISG trends and how we see collaboration technologies, will come to the fore. I can tell you now, people will move beyond focusing on video and the conferencing side of things to think about how else they can work together. And what you'll see is a whole set of startups, niche providers, advisory firms and consultants coming in to fill that space. And that's going to be a very healthy place to be. And it means that there's a whole range of advice available for organizations as they think about new working models. And that means having a flexible workforce. So, I don't think there's going to be one size fits all coming out of this. If you talk to people about their experiences during the lockdown, I think some people have found it tremendously refreshing to get away from a commute and just focus on what they need to do at home. Others have found, different pressures at home providing a chaotic workplace where they find it really hard to focus. What we can see happening is, as we understand some of those preferences, a flexible workforce and set of preferences will emerge. And that means the ability to support a range of different working models is going to be a competitive advantage for organizations as they plan their go forward strategy. And similarly, the ability to really understand what customers need and what's driving their new purchasing and behavior patterns is going to be very important. I think there are a range of organizations that perhaps might confess to giving a bit of lip service to that side of things, who are going to have to really revisit their customer and what their new buying model is. And similarly, something that we'll be talking about a lot today is really looking at those new employee engagement models and including them in the process of designing the future of work, the new future that we're talking about in our 3 horizons. So that's the start of the ISG Predicts and the ISG Trend sessions. Now we'll be moving on to the full agenda.